Kawhi's perfect return just got complicated. Kawhi Leonard was supposed to walk back into Toronto like a conquering hero returning to the city where everything once became legendary. The building, the memories, the championship banner, the finals MVP run, the shot making, the silence, the mystery, it was all supposed to feel like basketball poetry. But just when Raptors fans were getting ready to celebrate one of the most emotional reunions in modern NBA history, the story took a sudden turn. Because Kawhi Leonard is not returning to Toronto alone. He is bringing the spotlight. He is bringing a massive contract negotiation. He is bringing the pressure of championship expectations. And most dangerously, he is bringing a cloud from Los Angeles that still has not disappeared. The Raptors made their move fast and loud. They pushed major assets across the table to bring back the player who once delivered the greatest season in franchise history. This was not a small gamble. This was not a quiet roster adjustment. This was Toronto telling the entire league, we believe Kawhi can still change everything. And on paper, it makes sense. Kawhi is still one of the most dangerous playoff wings in basketball when his body is right. He can control a game without saying much. He can slow the pace, attack mismatches, punish defenders in the mid-range, and bring the type of championship calm that young teams spend years trying to find. For a Raptors team trying to climb back into the top of the East, that kind of player is priceless. But this is where the celebration becomes complicated. Right before extension talks, Kawhi changed representation. A new agent, a new voice at the table, a new layer of strategy around a deal that could be worth more than $100 million, and the timing immediately raised eyebrows because the NBA's investigation into his Clippers situation is still sitting in the background. That is the part no one in Toronto can ignore. This is not just about whether Kawhi can still play. This is about whether the past in Los Angeles follows him into the future in Toronto. It is about money, trust, health, legacy, and a league office that has not fully closed the book. So now, the Raptors are standing in the middle of a fascinating question. Did they just bring home the missing piece for another championship run? Or did they just attach their future to the most complicated superstar story in the NBA? Because Kawhi Leonard's return is emotional. It is powerful. It is cinematic, but it is not clean. And when a superstar comes home with unfinished business behind him, the whole league watches differently. Before we go deeper, let me know where you are watching from right now. Are you in Toronto, Los Angeles, New York, Miami, or somewhere overseas? If you believe Kawhi can still lead the Raptors back to serious contention, comment 1. If you think this move is too risky because of the injuries, the contract, and the investigation, comment 2. And if you want more NBA drama, trade news, and behind-the-scenes stories like this, make sure you subscribe right now, because this Kawhi Leonard story is only getting started. Toronto paid the price for a dream. Toronto did not bring Kawhi Leonard back for nostalgia. They brought him back because they believe the championship window can open again. And in the NBA, belief is expensive. The Raptors did not casually make a phone call and ask the Clippers what it would take. They stepped into one of the biggest gambles of the offseason and paid like a team that understood exactly what was at stake. Players, picks, future flexibility, valuable assets, all of it moved because Toronto saw one thing clearly. If Kawhi Leonard is even close to the player he used to be, the Eastern Conference changes overnight. That is why this trade feels bigger than a normal superstar move. This is not just about adding scoring. This is about bringing back the man who gave Toronto its greatest basketball memory. The man who turned one season into a lifetime of highlights. The man who walked into Canada, carried a franchise through pressure, silence, expectation, and pain, and walked out with a championship banner. For Raptors fans, Kawhi is not just another star, he is history. But history can be dangerous when it starts controlling the present. Because the Raptors are not trading for the 2019 version of Kawhi in a time machine. They are trading for a veteran superstar with a legendary resume, a complicated body, and a past few years filled with unanswered questions. That is what makes this move so fascinating. Toronto is chasing the feeling of what Kawhi once gave them, while hoping the reality of who he is now can still match the dream. And maybe it can. When healthy, Kawhi is still a problem no team wants to solve in the playoffs. He does not need to talk loud. He does not need to dominate headlines. He just gets to his spots, plays at his pace, and makes defenders feel helpless. A young Raptors core with Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and other athletic pieces suddenly looks very different with Kawhi standing in the middle of it. He gives them patience. He gives them playoff knowledge. He gives them credibility. But he also gives them pressure because once you pay this kind of price, there is no soft landing. Toronto cannot say this is just about development anymore. They cannot hide behind patience. They cannot sell fans a slow rebuild while paying championship prices for a championship name. The message is clear. The Raptors want to matter again right now, and that is where the danger begins. If Kawhi stays healthy, this move could become one of the boldest and smartest swings in recent NBA memory. If he does not, Toronto may look back and wonder if emotion pushed them into a deal their future was never ready to carry. That is the thin line this franchise is walking. A reunion can feel beautiful on the day it happened, but the bill always comes later. The new agent and the strange timing. The trade was already big enough. Then Kawhi changed the room. Right before extension talks were expected to begin, Leonard made a move that instantly changed the conversation around his return. He brought in new representation. Harrison Gaines stepped forward as the new voice handling negotiations, while longtime figures around Kawhi's business life moved out of the spotlight. That might sound like a normal business decision, but in the NBA, timing is never just timing. Players change agents, stars change advisors, superstars adjust their teams before major contracts all the time. But when it happens right before a deal worth more than $100 million, and while a league investigation is still active in the background, people notice. They notice fast, because this is not just any contract. This could be the final massive payday of Kawhi Leonard's career. This is the kind of deal that does not just shape a season. It shapes the ending of a legacy. It tells the world where he wants to finish, how much Toronto trusts him, and how much risk both sides are willing to accept. So why change now? That is the question hanging over everything. The clean version is simple. Kawhi wanted a fresh voice, a legal-minded representative, someone who understands contracts, pressure, compliance, and the complexity of negotiating under a bright spotlight. If that is the explanation, it actually makes sense. With so much money on the table and so much outside noise, Kawhi needed someone who could protect the deal and keep the process controlled. But the more dramatic version is harder to ignore. Because his uncle, Dennis Robertson, has been tied to questions before, he has been part of Kawhi's business world for years, and his name has appeared in past conversations about what teams were allegedly asked to provide during free agency. Now, with the aspiration investigation still connected to the Clippers chapter, Kawhi's camp suddenly looks different. That does not prove wrongdoing, but it does create distance. And sometimes, in professional sports, distance is a message. The Raptors will not say that publicly. Kawhi will not say that publicly. His camp will likely frame everything as preparation for the next chapter. But behind closed doors, every front office executive in the league understands the optics. If your last deal is under review, your next deal has to look clean, simple, and impossible to question. That is why this agent change matters. It is not only about negotiation, it is about perception. It is about sending the league, the Raptors, and the public a signal that this new contract will be handled differently. Kawhi's return to Toronto is supposed to be emotional. Now, it is legal, financial, strategic, and political. And suddenly, the quietest superstar in basketball is once again standing at the center of one of the loudest stories in the league. The aspiration cloud that won't go away. The problem for Kawhi Leonard is simple. The Clippers chapter did not end when the trade call ended. It followed him. And at the center of it is a company most casual NBA fans had barely heard of before this story exploded. Aspiration, a green banking and sustainability company that once looked like a flashy business partner for the Clippers, but later became the source of one of the strangest investigations in recent league history. The basic question is dangerous. Did the Clippers directly or indirectly use an outside business arrangement to get extra money to Kawhi Leonard beyond what NBA salary rules allow? That is the kind of question the league cannot ignore, because the salary cap only works if every team believes the rules are real. If one owner can use a sponsor, investment, or outside company to secretly increase a player's compensation, then the entire system starts to crack. Every rival team would ask the same thing. Why are we following the cap if someone else found a back door? That is why this investigation matters beyond Kawhi. It is not just about one endorsement deal. It is about trust between 30 franchises. The suspicious part is the structure. Steve Ballmer had financial ties to Aspiration. The Clippers had a major business relationship with Aspiration. Then Kawhi reportedly had his own endorsement agreement with the same company. In a normal world, maybe that is just business. Star players get sponsorships, teams have sponsors, owners invest money, but this did not stay normal. Questions started when reports suggested Kawhi may not have delivered the kind of public marketing work people usually expect from a deal that large. No huge campaign, no major visible brand push, no clear public-facing return that matched the money being discussed. That is where the story turned darker, because if money moves to a superstar without a real promotional exchange behind it, people start asking whether the sponsorship was really a sponsorship at all. Again, nothing should be treated as proven unless the league confirms it. That distinction matters. Accusations are not verdicts. Investigations are not convictions. But in the NBA, uncertainty can still damage a reputation long before a final ruling arrives. And Kawhi knows that. Toronto knows it too. They can celebrate his return. They can prepare the extension. They can talk about fit, leadership, and championship experience, but they cannot pretend the aspiration story vanished because Kawhi now wears a different jersey. That is the uncomfortable truth. This cloud belongs to the Clippers era, but it still floats over the Raptors' future. And until the NBA closes the case, every contract conversation around Kawhi Leonard will carry one silent question. What happens if the league finds something serious? Uncle Dennis in the shadow of 2019, every superstar has a circle. And for Kawhi Leonard, one name has followed nearly every major business decision of his career. Dennis Robertson, his uncle and longtime advisor. That is why this story feels bigger than a normal contract negotiation. Robertson's name has been connected to controversy before. Back in 2019, when Kawhi was choosing between the Raptors, Clippers, Lakers, and other teams, reports claimed his camp asked for benefits outside a standard NBA contract. Things like private travel access, endorsement guarantees, and other special perks were discussed in league circles. The NBA investigated those claims at the time and did not punish anyone. So officially, nothing was proven. But reputations in the NBA do not always disappear, just because a case closes quietly. Now, years later, Robertson's name is back near another uncomfortable situation, the aspiration investigation. That is what makes people look at this differently. One controversy can be dismissed. Two similar stories create a pattern people will question. For Toronto, this is awkward. The Raptors know what Kawhi means to their city. They know he delivered a championship, but they also know the same family business structure that followed him before is now part of the conversation again. That may explain why Kawhi changed representation before extension talks. Bringing in Harrison Gaines creates distance, structure, and a cleaner public image. It does not prove anything bad happened, but it shows Kawhi understands the moment is sensitive. This is no longer just about basketball. It is about trust, business, family influence, and legacy. And before Kawhi can fully start his next chapter in Toronto, he has to make sure the people around him do not keep dragging the old questions back into the room. The Clippers' failed gamble. When Kawhi Leonard joined the Clippers, it felt like the franchise had finally changed its destiny. They were no longer just the other team in Los Angeles. Kawhi had just won a championship in Toronto. Paul George arrived beside him. Steve Ballmer had money, ambition, and a new vision. The Clippers looked ready to become a true NBA powerhouse. But the dream never fully happened. The talent was real, the expectations were massive, but injuries, load management, playoff disappointments, and constant uncertainty kept getting in the way. Every season started with the same question: if Kawhi is healthy, can the Clippers win it all? And every year, that if became heavier. Kawhi still had brilliant moments. When he played, he could still look like one of the most dangerous playoff players in the league. But availability became the issue that defined everything. A superstar can only carry a franchise if he is on the court when it matters most. That is what haunted Los Angeles. The Clippers bet their future on Kawhi and Paul George. They wanted banners, respect, and a new identity. Instead, they got short playoff runs, medical questions, and eventually, a messy ending tied to the aspiration investigation. That is why Kawhi's exit does not feel clean. It is not just a failed basketball project. It is a warning about risk. The Clippers chased greatness, but greatness never stayed healthy long enough to reward them. Now Toronto is making its own gamble. The Raptors believe they can get the version of Kawhi that still changes playoff games. But the Clippers already learned how dangerous that belief can be when the body, the timing, and the drama all work against you. Los Angeles wanted a dynasty. Instead, they became the cautionary tale Toronto must now avoid. Why Toronto still believes in Kawhi. Even with all the risk, Toronto still has a reason to believe, because Kawhi Leonard is not selling hope, he is selling proof. He has already done it before. He walked into Toronto, carried the Raptors through the most important playoff run in franchise history, won Finals MVP, and delivered a championship that changed the city forever. That kind of memory does not fade. And on the court, the fit still makes sense. Toronto has young talent, athletic wings, and players who can run, defend, and grow around a proven star. Scotty Barnes gives them energy and versatility. RJ Barrett gives them scoring pressure. Emmanuel quickly gives them speed and guard play. What they needed was a closer. Kawhi can still be that closer. He does not need to dominate every night. He does not need to be the entire offense in January. What Toronto needs is the playoff version of Kawhi. Calm, physical, efficient, and fearless when the game slows down. That is why the Raptors were willing to take the swing. Because in the playoffs, teams need someone who can create a shot when the system breaks. They need someone who does not panic under pressure. They need someone who has already stood on the biggest stage and won. Kawhi gives them that, but everything depends on health. That is the part Toronto cannot ignore. The Clippers believed in Kawhi too. They saw the same greatness. They dreamed the same dream. But injuries kept getting in the way, so the Raptors are not betting that Kawhi is young again. They are betting that the version he has left is still enough to change a playoff series. It is risky. But in the NBA, safe teams rarely become legendary. The contract that could define everything. The extension is not just about money, it is about trust. When Toronto sits down with Kawhi Leonard's new representation, they are deciding how much they believe in this reunion. A contract worth more than $100 million is not simply a reward for what Kawhi did in 2019. It is a bet on what he can still do now. That is where the pressure begins. From Kawhi's side, Toronto makes sense. He knows the organization, he knows the city, he knows what it feels like to win there. After the Clippers experiment ended with injuries, disappointment, and controversy, the Raptors offer him something powerful: familiarity. For Toronto, the decision is harder. They cannot just pay for memories. They have to be realistic about age, health, and risk. Kawhi is still dangerous when healthy, but his body has already changed the direction of multiple seasons. A huge extension could become brilliant if he leads them deep into the playoffs. It could also become painful if injuries return. That is the gamble. The Raptors need to show commitment, but they also need discipline. They need to build a roster that protects him during the regular season and lets him peak when the games matter most. They need to manage his minutes, his recovery, and the expectations around him. Because Kawhi cannot be asked to recreate 2019 by himself. That version of the story is gone. This new version has to be smarter. If the extension works, Toronto becomes one of the great comeback stories in the league. The champion returns, the young core rises, and the Raptors become dangerous again. If it fails, the contract becomes a reminder that emotion can be expensive. That is why this deal could define everything. It is not just the signature. It is Toronto choosing belief over fear. What the NBA investigation could change. The biggest problem for Toronto is that they do not control the investigation. They can control the contract talks, they can control the roster, they can control Kawhi's workload, but they cannot control what the NBA decides about the Clippers' aspiration and the money connected to Kawhi's old deal. That is why this story is still dangerous. The investigation belongs to the Clippers era, but Kawhi is now a Raptor. So even if the punishment falls on Los Angeles, the attention follows him to Toronto. If the NBA finds nothing serious, the Raptors can move forward. Kawhi can focus on basketball. The league can close the chapter, and the story becomes much cleaner. But if the NBA finds real salary cap circumvention, everything changes. The Clippers could face fines, lost draft picks, or other penalties. The league would have to send a strong message to every franchise. No team can use outside sponsorships or business deals to secretly pay a player beyond the cap. That would become a major NBA story. For Kawhi, the biggest issue may be reputation. Even if he keeps playing, and even if his Toronto contract remains safe, the headlines would not disappear. Every press conference, every losing streak, every national TV game could bring the questions back. That kind of noise can hurt a team. Toronto is trying to build chemistry. They are trying to create a new identity around Kawhi and their young core. The last thing they need is a season where basketball gets buried under questions about lawyers, money, and old Clippers business. That is why clarity matters. The Raptors need the investigation to end. Kawhi needs the investigation to end. Even the league needs it to end because the issue is bigger than one player. It is about whether the NBA's financial rules still mean something. Until the final answer comes, the cloud remains. And every step Kawhi takes in Toronto will be watched through that shadow. The legacy decision. In the end, this story is about legacy. Kawhi Leonard has already achieved what most players never will. He has won championships. He has won Finals MVP. He has changed the history of a franchise. In Toronto, he became more than a star. He became the face of the greatest basketball moment the city has ever seen. But endings matter. And this ending is complicated. If Kawhi returns to Toronto, stays healthy, helps the young core grow, and leads the Raptors into another serious playoff run, this becomes a beautiful full circle story. The champion comes home. The city believes, again, the final chapter becomes about redemption. But if the injuries return, if the contract becomes too heavy, or if the NBA investigation keeps dragging his name into controversy, the story becomes something very different. It becomes a warning about risk, emotion, and how dangerous it can be to chase the past. That is the lesson for Toronto. Great franchises can respect memories, but they cannot be controlled by them. The Raptors must build for the Kawhi they have now. Not only the Kawhi they remember from 2019, they need smart planning, strong communication, careful health management, and a roster that does not force him to carry everything alone. For Kawhi, the lesson is just as important. Protect the ending. Protect the name. Protect the people around you by making sure every business move is clean, clear, and strong enough to survive public pressure. In today's NBA, talent opens the door, but trust keeps it open. And for fans, there is a human side too. Athletes are not just highlights and contracts, they are people carrying pressure, injuries, family influence, business decisions, and millions of opinions. It is fair to ask questions. It is also fair to wait for facts before turning accusations into final judgment. Toronto made its choice. Kawhi made his. Now everyone waits to see whether this reunion becomes a redemption story, a risky mistake, or one of the most dramatic final chapters in modern NBA history. If you believe Kawhi Leonard can still lead the Raptors on a deep playoff run, comment 1. If you think Toronto took too big of a risk, comment 2. If you believe the NBA investigation will become the biggest part of this story, comment 3. And if you want more NBA news, trade drama, superstar stories, and behind-the-scenes breakdowns, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with another NBA fan.